Tensions are rising and emotions are boiling over. Makebi Zulu has just made it clear there will be no negotiations regarding the burial of former President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. What does this bold declaration mean for the government, the courts, and the family? No negotiations will take place over ECL's burial. Makebi Zulu. In a powerful and unfiltered statement, Patriotic Front's legal counsel Makebi Zulu has set the record straight. The family of Dr. Edgar Lungu will not compromise over burial terms or political interference. What is Makebi Zulu accusing the government of? How will this affect ongoing court cases? What are Zambians saying in response? Watch this full breakdown from InspirAfrica official and understand the full statement and what it really means, the legal and political implications. Family versus state, the rising tension over ECL's legacy. 1. What is Makebi Zulu accusing the Zambian government of? Makebi Zulu, a prominent Zambian lawyer, politician, and spokesperson for the family of the late former President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, has made several pointed accusations against the Zambian government, led by President HHvsPF, particularly in the context of the ongoing dispute over Lungu's funeral arrangements. These accusations stem from the family's dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the late president's burial and broader political conduct. Below is a detailed breakdown of the accusations. A. Inconsistency and dishonesty in negotiations. Zulu has accused the Zambian government of engaging in inconsistent and dishonest behavior during negotiations concerning the burial of Edgar Lungu, who passed away on June 5, 2025 in South Africa. Specifically, he claims that the government repeatedly shifted its positions on key issues, undermining trust and stalling progress. In a live interview on South Africa's SABC on July 3, 2025, Zulu stated, "Lately, there have not been any negotiations with the government. Every time we thought we had found common ground, the government changed its position on matters of concern." He further highlighted that initial talks began on June 6, 2025, but were marred by the government's alleged backtracking, even after mediation attempts by regional leaders like former Malawian President Bekele Maluzi collapsed due to the government's reversal of agreed-upon terms. Zulu's accusation of flip-flopping suggests a lack of sincerity and reliability on the part of the government, portraying it as prioritizing political optics over genuine dialogue. He emphasized that the government's actions were not about respecting Lungu's legacy or the family's wishes, but rather about maintaining a favorable public image, particularly in the eyes of the international community. B. Public relations theatrics over sincerity. Zulu has repeatedly described the government's approach as a public relations campaign rather than a sincere effort to resolve the burial dispute. He accused the state of prioritizing optics over respect for the late president and his family, stating, "This is not about politics. This is about respect. Respect for a man who led this nation. Respect for a grieving family. And respect for truth." He further criticized the government for misrepresenting the status of the national mourning period, noting that state media initially suggested it had ended, only to later claim it had been extended, which he cited as evidence of untrustworthiness. C. Persecution and victimization of Lungu and his family. Zulu has alleged that the Zambian government under President HHvsPF persecuted Edgar Lungu during his lifetime and continues to victimize his family after his death. He claimed that Lungu was victimized for 4 years by the government, particularly after losing his presidential benefits due to his attempt to re-enter active politics. These benefits, which included security, a diplomatic passport, state vehicles, a furnished house, medical insurance, and funeral expenses, were withdrawn after Lungu considered running for president again, a move the Constitutional Court later ruled unconstitutional due to term limits. Zulu argued that this withdrawal forced Lungu to travel to South Africa as a private citizen for medical treatment, which he believes contributed to his death, as earlier medical attention might have been more effective. The accusation of persecution extends to Lungu's family, with Zulu asserting that the government's actions, including legal actions against Lungu's widow and children over property disputes, are politically motivated. He has denied claims that the family demanded the withdrawal of these court cases as a condition for releasing Lungu's body, calling such allegations false and misleading. D. Hypocrisy in constitutional amendments. Beyond the burial dispute, Zulu has accused the government of hypocrisy in its approach to constitutional amendments. In April 2025, he criticized the United Party for National Development (UPND) government for pushing amendments that serve its interests while condemning similar proposals from the opposition. He argued that the UPND's method contradicts democratic principles, lacking transparency, public consultation, and legislative scrutiny. In May 2025, he further warned that proposed constitutional changes to expand presidential powers over parliamentary appointments represent a dangerous power grab, undermining the democratic foundations of Zambia. These accusations paint the government as inconsistent and self-serving, prioritizing political control over national interests. E. Undermining judicial independence. Zulu has also accused President HHvsPF of interfering with the judiciary, particularly following the dismissal of 3 constitutional court judges in October 2024. These judges were fired over a 2016 ruling that favored Lungu, which Zulu described as illegal and motivated by personal interests, given HHvsPF's involvement in the case as an opposition leader at the time. This accusation ties into broader claims of the the government using its authority to suppress political opponents and manipulate state institutions. F. Disrespecting Lungu's legacy and family wishes. A central accusation is that the government's insistence on controlling Lungu's burial, particularly at the Embassy Park presidential burial site in Lusaka, disregards the family's wishes and Lungu's alleged preference for a discreet burial in South Africa. Zulu has stated that it would be a mockery for the HHvsPF administration to preside over Lungu's funeral, given the lack of trust and the government's alleged mistreatment of Lungu. He emphasized that the body belongs to the family, not the state, especially since Lungu lost his presidential benefits, stripping the government of legal authority to dictate burial arrangements. Summary of accusations. Makebi Zulu's accusations portray the Zambian government as dishonest, hypocritical, and politically motivated, engaging in a pattern of persecution, manipulation, and disrespect toward the late Edgar Lungu and his family. These claims center on the burial dispute, but extend to broader governance issues, including constitutional amendments and judicial interference, suggesting a government more concerned with consolidating power than upholding democratic principles or respecting a former leader's legacy. 2. How will this affect ongoing court cases? The accusations made by Makebi Zulu and the resulting legal standoff have significant implications for ongoing court cases, particularly those related to Edgar Lungu's burial and other legal matters involving the Lungu family and their associates. Below, I analyze the impact on these cases, drawing on the context of the burial dispute and related legal proceedings. A. The burial dispute in South African courts. The primary court case affected by Zulu's accusations is the ongoing litigation in the Gauteng division of the High Court in Pretoria, South Africa, concerning the burial of Edgar Lungu. The Zambian government, through Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, has sought an urgent interdict to halt the burial in South Africa, arguing that it is a matter of national interest governed by Zambian law, which mandates military honors and ceremonial rites for a former head of state. The lawsuit targets Lungu's widow, Esther, 4 of their children, Makebi Zulu, and the funeral company Two Mountains Proprietary, which holds Lungu's remains. Impact of accusations. Zulu's accusations of government dishonesty and flip-flopping have escalated tensions, making compromise unlikely and prolonging the legal battle. His assertion that nobody will have access to Lungu's body until the matter is determined by the courts indicates a firm stance, potentially leading to extended litigation. The family's vow to fight in court, even if it takes a year, suggests they are prepared for a protracted legal process, which could delay Lungu's burial and keep the issue in the public eye. Legal challenges for Zulu. As a Zambian lawyer not admitted to the South African bar, Zulu cannot argue directly in South African courts, requiring the family to hire local legal representation. This has led to accusations that Zulu is profiting from the family's legal bills, potentially complicating the case's optics and increasing financial strain on the family. Court timeline. The Pretoria High Court has set a schedule for the case, with the Zambian government directed to file an amended notice of motion and supplementary affidavit by July 4, 2025, and the Lungu family to file their heads of argument by July 24, 2025, ahead of a hearing on August 4, 2025. Zulu's accusations may influence the court's perception of the government's intentions, but the outcome will hinge on legal arguments about national interest versus family rights. B. Other court cases involving the Lungu family. The Lungu family is involved in separate legal proceedings in Zambia, particularly related to anti-corruption investigations. Lungu's widow, Esther, and one of their daughters were arrested in connection with properties worth over $2 million, suspected to be proceeds of crime. These cases are not directly tied to the burial dispute, but are part of the broader narrative of alleged government persecution. Impact of accusations. Zulu's denial that the family demanded the withdrawal of these cases as a condition for releasing Lungu's body aims to separate the burial dispute from these legal matters. However, his accusations of persecution may embolden the family's defense strategy, framing the cases as politically motivated. This could lead to increased public scrutiny of the government's anti-corruption efforts, potentially influencing judicial proceedings if public pressure mounts. Potential delays. The burial dispute's prominence may divert attention and resources from these cases, as the family's legal team, including Zulu, is heavily focused on the South African litigation. This could slow down proceedings in Zambia, especially if the family uses the burial issue to rally public support or challenge the government's credibility. C. Makebi Zulu's own legal challenges. Zulu himself faces legal scrutiny, having been reported to the Law Association of Zambia (LAZ) for alleged fraud and professional misconduct in a property transfer case involving a Lusaka resident, Peter Fairai. Additionally, his brother, Caleb Zulu, a police officer, is accused in the unresolved murder case of Guntula Mulia, the late Director General of the Independent Broadcasting Authority. Impact on burial case. These personal legal issues could undermine Zulu's credibility as the family's spokesperson, potentially weakening their position in the burial dispute. Critics have already accused Zulu of exploiting the family for financial gain, which may affect public and judicial perceptions of his motives. Broader legal implications. The fraud allegations against Zulu could lead to disciplinary action by LAZ, potentially limiting his ability to practice law in Zambia. This would force the Lungu family to seek alternative representation, which could disrupt their legal strategy across multiple cases. The murder case involving his brother adds further complexity, as it raises questions about Zulu's ability to remain impartial given his family ties. D. Political and judicial climate. Zulu's accusations of judicial interference, particularly regarding the dismissal of constitutional court judges, could have a chilling effect on ongoing court cases. By framing the government's actions as an attack on judicial independence, Zulu may encourage other opposition figures to challenge the judiciary's impartiality, potentially leading to delays or appeals in politically sensitive cases. This could create a backlog in the courts and heighten public distrust in the judicial system. Summary of impact. Zulu's accusations have intensified the burial dispute, likely prolonging the South African court case and delaying Lungu's burial. They may also bolster the family's defense in Zambian anti-corruption cases by framing them as politically motivated, though Zulu's own legal troubles could undermine his effectiveness. The broader political climate, marked by accusations of judicial interference, may complicate the resolution of these cases, potentially leading to public unrest or increased polarization. 3. What are Zambians saying in response? Public reactions in Zambia to Makebi Zulu's accusations and the broader burial dispute are varied, reflecting the country's deep political divisions. Drawing on sentiments expressed in online comments and posts, as well as the broader context, I outline the range of reactions below. A. Support for the Lungu family. Some Zambians, particularly supporters of Edgar Lungu and the Patriotic Front (PF), align with Zulu's accusations, viewing the government's actions as disrespectful and politically motivated. They argue that the HHvsPF administration is attempting to control Lungu's burial to burnish its image while disregarding the family's wishes. Comments on social media platforms, such as those reported by the Zambian Observer, express frustration with the government's handling of the situation, with some calling for HHvsPF to apologize to the Lungu family. For example, opposition figure Ngoma advised HHvsPF to travel to South Africa to personally resolve the issue, indicating sympathy for the family's position. These supporters see Zulu's outspokenness as a courageous stand against government overreach, particularly given Lungu's legacy as a former president. They view the burial dispute as a continuation of the political rivalry between HHvsPF and Lungu, with some believing that the government's insistence on a state funeral is a ploy to mask past mistreatment. B. Criticism of Makebi Zulu and the Lungu family. Conversely, many Zambians, particularly those aligned with the UPND, have criticized Zulu and the Lungu family for their handling of the burial dispute. Online comments reported by the Zambian Observer describe Zulu as a scam and accuse him of exploiting the family for financial gain, with some labeling him as driven by self-glorification and maximizing money income. Critics argue that the family's refusal to allow a state funeral in Zambia is disrespectful to national traditions, citing the precedent of Kenneth Kaunda, whose family's preferences were overridden in favor of burial at Embassy Park. Some Zambians have expressed frustration with the family's decision to pursue litigation in South Africa, viewing it as an attempt to embarrass the government and prolong the controversy. Comments like "UP fools and its surrogates brought this situation upon yourselves," and "do not take the Zambian people for granted," reflect anger at what some perceive as tribalism or political opportunism by Zulu and the PF. Others argue that Lungu's alleged corruption and mismanagement during his presidency disqualify him from receiving a dignified state funeral, with one comment stating, "His only mistake was becoming Zambian president, which has made him to be under so whatever, be buried at presidential burial site." C. Calls for unity and resolution. Amid the polarized reactions, some Zambians have called for a resolution that honors Lungu's legacy while respecting national unity. These voices, though less prominent, emphasize the need for closure and reconciliation, given the emotional toll of the prolonged dispute. The Zambian Observer noted that Zambians across the political divide are calling for a swift and respectful resolution to avoid further polarization. President HHvsPF's own appeal for peace, dignity, and togetherness resonated with some, though others viewed it as hollow given the ongoing feud. D. Broader political context. The public's response is shaped by Zambia's polarized political landscape, with Lungu's legacy remaining a contentious issue. Supporters see him as a victim of HHvsPF's vindictive politics, while detractors view his presidency as marked by corruption and authoritarianism, justifying the government's actions. The burial dispute has become a lightning rod for these divisions, with Zulu's accusations amplifying existing tensions. Social media posts, such as those from at SABC News and at Zambian Observer, reflect this divide, with some praising Zulu's defiance and others condemning his rhetoric as inflammatory. Summary of public reaction. Zambians are deeply divided over Zulu's accusations, with Lungu supporters backing the family's stance and criticizing the government, while UPND supporters view Zulu and the family as obstructionist and opportunistic. A smaller group calls for unity and a dignified resolution, but the polarized political climate makes consensus difficult. The public's response will likely influence the political ramifications of the dispute, as discussed below. 4. Makebi Zulu's no negotiation negotiations statement explained. Makebi Zulu's no negotiations statement, as reported by the Zambian Observer, encapsulates the Lungu family's frustration with the Zambian government's handling of Edgar Lungu's burial arrangements. Below, I explain the context, meaning, and implications of this statement. The context of the statement. Zulu's assertion that lately there have not been any negotiations with the government was made during a live interview on SABC on July 3, 2025, in response to claims by Chief Government Spokesperson Cornelius Mwitwa that negotiations were ongoing. Zulu refuted this, stating that talks had stalled due to the government's repeated backtracking, which began as early as June 6, 2025, the day after Lungu's death. He cited failed mediation efforts by former regional leaders, including Bakili Maluzi, as evidence of the government's unwillingness to engage sincerely. The no negotiations statement reflects the family's decision to shift from dialogue to litigation, as evidenced by their pursuit of the burial case in South African courts. Zulu's claim that the body belongs to the family, not the state, underscores their belief that the government has no legal or moral authority to dictate funeral arrangements, especially since Lungu lost his presidential benefits. B. Meaning and intent. The statement is both a declaration of the family's resolve and a public rebuke of the government's conduct. By asserting that no meaningful negotiations have occurred, Zulu aims to expose government inconsistency, highlight the government's alleged dishonesty and shifting positions, which he believes have undermined trust, assert family autonomy, emphasize that the family has the right to decide Lungu's burial location, particularly given his alleged wish for a discreet burial in South Africa, rally public support, frame the dispute as a matter of dignity and respect, appealing to Lungu's supporters and those critical of the HHvsPF administration, strengthen legal position. By rejecting further negotiations, Zulu signals the family's commitment to resolving the issue through the courts, potentially pressuring the government to clarify its legal stance. C. Implications. The no negotiations stance has several implications. Prolonged legal battle. By rejecting dialogue, the family has committed to a court-driven resolution, which could delay Lungu's burial for months or even a year, as Zulu has indicated. Increased polarization. The statement has deepened the divide between Lungu's supporters and the government, with public reactions reflecting this tension. Pressure on the government. Zulu's public criticism may force the HHvsPF administration to respond more transparently, though it risks escalating the political feud. Financial and emotional toll. The family's reliance on litigation, particularly in South Africa, will increase legal costs and prolong the grieving process, potentially alienating some supporters who seek closure. Summary. The no negotiations statement is a bold assertion of the Lungu family's position, driven by distrust in the government and a commitment to legal recourse. It underscores the breakdown of dialogue and sets the stage for a contentious court battle with significant implications for Zambia's political and social landscape. 5. Government position versus family demands. The dispute over Edgar Lungu's burial highlights a fundamental clash between the Zambian government's position and the Lungu family's demands. Below, I outline both sides and analyze their differences. A. Government position. The Zambian government, led by President HHvsPF, argues that Lungu's burial is a matter of national interest, governed by Zambian law and precedent. Key points include state funeral at Embassy Park. The government insists that Lungu, as a former president, should be buried at the Embassy Park presidential burial site in Lusaka, where other former heads of state are interred, with full military honors and ceremonial rites. This is supported by the precedent of Kenneth Kaunda, whose family's preferences were overridden by Zambian courts. National interest. Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha has argued that the burial is not a private family affair but a public matter, given Lungu's status as a former head of state. The government seeks to repatriate his body to Zambia to uphold historical and legal norms. Ongoing negotiations. Chief Government Spokesperson Cornelius Mwitwa has claimed that negotiations with the family are ongoing, contradicting Zulu's assertion of a breakdown in talks. The government has expressed a willingness to engage, though it maintains that public interest must take precedence. Response to accusations. The government denies allegations of persecution or dishonesty, with HHvsPF emphasizing peace, dignity, and togetherness, and dismissing concerns about delays in addressing Lungu's death. It also disputes claims that Lungu's final wishes were for a South African burial, arguing that such claims lack verification. B. Family demands. The Lungu family, represented by Makebi Zulu, has taken a firm stance against the government's position, prioritizing their autonomy and Lungu's alleged wishes. Key demands include burial in South Africa. The family insists on burying Lungu in South Africa, where he died, citing his alleged preference for a discreet burial away from the HHvsPF administration's control. Zulu has claimed that Lungu did not want a state funeral presided over by those who pretended to care after mistreating him. Control over the body. Zulu has asserted that ECL's body belongs to the family, not the state, especially since Lungu lost his presidential benefits, which they argue strips the government of authority over the burial. Dignity and respect. The family demands a burial that honors Lungu's legacy without being shrouded in mockery or used as a public relations tool by the government. They view the state's insistence on a Lusaka burial as disrespectful given the history of animosity. No link to other court cases. The family has denied demanding the withdrawal of anti-corruption cases against against Lungu's widow and children as a condition for releasing the body, focusing solely on the burial issue. C. Key points of contention. The government and family differ on several critical issues. Authority over burial. The government views the burial as a state matter, while the family insists it is a private family decision, particularly given Lungu's loss of benefits. Location of burial. The government's push for Embassy Park contrasts with the family's preference for South Africa, rooted in Lungu's alleged wishes and distrust of the government. Trust and intentions. The family accuses the government of insincerity and political motives, while the government claims it seeks to honor Lungu in line with national tradition. Legal versus moral rights. The government relies on legal precedents, while the family emphasizes moral rights based on Lungu's personal wishes and their grievances. Summary. The government's position prioritizes national interest and legal precedent, advocating for a state funeral in Zambia, while the family demands autonomy and a South African burial to honor Lungu's wishes and avoid perceived government hypocrisy. This clash has led to a legal standoff, with both sides entrenched in their positions. 6. Legal and political ramifications. The dispute over Edgar Lungu's burial and Makebi Zulu's accusations have far-reaching legal and political consequences for Zambia, affecting governance, public trust, and the judicial system. Below, I explore these ramifications in detail. A. Legal ramifications. Prolonged litigation. The South African court case could extend for months or even a year, as Zulu has indicated, delaying Lungu's burial and keeping the issue in the public and judicial spotlight. This may set a precedent for how disputes over former heads of state are handled, potentially influencing future cases. Judicial independence. Zulu's accusations of judicial interference, particularly regarding the dismissal of constitutional court judges, could undermine public confidence in the judiciary. If courts are perceived as politically compromised, it may lead to challenges in other high-profile cases, including those involving the Lungu family. Cross-border legal complexity. The involvement of South African courts introduces jurisdictional challenges, as Zulu cannot argue directly and must rely on local counsel. This could increase legal costs and complicate the case, potentially leading to appeals or further disputes. Zulu's legal standing. The fraud allegations against Zulu and his brother's murder case could impact his ability to represent the Lungu family effectively, potentially requiring new legal representation and disrupting ongoing cases. B. Political ramifications. Increased polarization. The dispute has deepened Zambia's political divide, with Lungu supporters rallying behind the family and UPND supporters backing the government. This polarization could escalate tensions ahead of the 2026 general elections, where the UPND is already projected to have an advantage. Erosion of public trust. Zulu's accusations of government hypocrisy and persecution may further erode trust in HHvsPF's administration, particularly among Lungu's base. The government's handling of the dispute will be scrutinized, potentially affecting its credibility domestically and internationally. Opposition mobilization. The PF and other opposition groups may use the burial dispute to galvanize support, portraying HHvsPF as authoritarian and vindictive. Zulu's role as a former PF MP and Lungu's lawyer positions him as a key figure in the strategy, though his own legal issues may limit his effectiveness. International perception. The dispute's coverage in international media, such as the BBC and the New York Times, could damage Zambia's image as a stable democracy, particularly if the government is seen as mishandling a sensitive national issue. C. Social and emotional impact. National mourning. The delay in Lungu's burial has denied Zambians the opportunity to mourn collectively, exacerbating emotional distress and fueling public frustration. This could lead to social unrest if the dispute remains unresolved. Legacy of Lungu. The controversy risks overshadowing Lungu's legacy, with supporters and detractors focusing on the dispute rather than his contributions or shortcomings as president. Summary. The legal ramifications include prolonged litigation, potential challenges to judicial independence, and complications from cross-border legal proceedings. Politically, the dispute risks deepening polarization, eroding trust, and strengthening opposition narratives, with implications for the 2026 elections. Socially, it has delayed national mourning and intensified divisions, impacting Zambia's social cohesion and international reputation. 7. What happens next in court? The next steps in the legal proceedings over Edgar Lungu's burial will be critical in determining the outcome of the dispute. Based on available information, here is an overview of what is likely to happen next. A. Court schedule and filings. July 4, 2025, the Zambian government, through Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, is expected to file an amended notice of motion and supplementary affidavit in the Pretoria High Court, outlining reasons why Lungu's body should be repatriated to Zambia. July 24, 2025, the Lungu family, represented by their South African legal team, must file their heads of argument and list of authorities, responding to the government's claims and asserting their right to bury Lungu in South Africa. August 4, 2025, the Pretoria High Court will hold a hearing to consider the case, deciding whether to maintain the interdict halting the burial or allow the family to proceed in South Africa. B. Key legal arguments. Government's case. The government will argue that Lungu's burial is a matter of national interest, citing Zambian law and the precedent of Kenneth Konda's burial at Embassy Park. They may challenge the credibility of Lungu's alleged wishes for a South African burial, demanding evidence such as written or recorded statements. Family's case. The The family will assert their legal and moral right to control the burial, emphasizing Lungu's loss of presidential benefits and his alleged preference for a discreet burial. They may argue that the government's actions are politically motivated and lack legitimacy due to past persecution. Role of South African courts. The court will need to balance international law, Zambian legal precedents, and the family's rights, potentially setting a significant precedent for cross-border disputes involving former heads of state. C. Possible outcomes. Interdict upheld. If the court rules in favor of the government, the burial in South Africa could be halted, and Lungu's body may be repatriated to Zambia for a state funeral. This would be a victory for the government, but could further alienate Lungu's supporters. Interdict lifted. If the court sides with the family, they could proceed with the burial in South Africa, potentially escalating tensions with the Zambian government and prompting further legal challenges. Compromise or mediation. Though unlikely given Zulu's no-negotiation stance, the court could encourage renewed mediation, possibly involving neutral parties, to reach a resolution that balances national interest and family wishes. D. Factors influencing the outcome. Evidence of Lungu's wishes. The credibility of the family's claim about Lungu's preference for a South African burial will be critical. Without verifiable evidence, the court may favor the government's position. Public and political pressure. The high-profile nature of the case, amplified by Zulu's accusations and media coverage, may influence the court's approach, particularly if public unrest grows. Zulu's credibility. Zulu's legal troubles, including fraud allegations, could undermine the family's case if his role as spokesperson is seen as compromised. Summary. The next steps involve critical filings and a hearing in August 2025, with the court weighing legal precedents, evidence, and jurisdictional issues. The outcome will determine whether Lungu is buried in South Africa or Zambia, with significant implications for Zambia's political and social landscape. Conclusion. Makebi Zulu's accusations against the Zambian government center on dishonesty, persecution, and hypocrisy, particularly in the context of Edgar Lungu's burial arrangements. These accusations have deepened the legal and political standoff, prolonging court cases, polarizing public opinion, and raising questions about governance and judicial independence. The no-negotiations statement reflects the family's distrust and commitment to litigation, while the government's insistence on a state funeral underscores its claim to national interest. The legal and political ramifications are profound, with potential to shape Zambia's democratic trajectory and public trust ahead of the 2026 elections. The upcoming court proceedings in South Africa will be pivotal, with the August 4, 2025 hearing likely to determine the immediate future of this contentious issue.